All right, we're going to get started. As Jake mentioned, I am not Mark Wu. Again, I'm Brandon Pollock, Director of Global Affairs here at 1776. So it's an honor to have Congressman Jared Polis. You know, in the startup world, he's quite the legend. He's been a tremendous, successful entrepreneur, and he's transitioned from that world over into the world of being a congressman. And so it's a pleasure to introduce Congressman Polis.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I have to, next time I come to 1776, I have to learn not to drive. Try to drive across town at this hour.
That's a good idea. So let's jump right in. So let's talk about how financing has changed in the digital age. As I'd mentioned, you know, you've been a serial entrepreneur. You know, started your first company while you were in college, and the way we've seen, so it's not just traditional banks, VC firms, where entrepreneurs can gain capital from, right? You have Angels List now, you have a number of crowdfunding platforms, but you also have a number of tools like QuickBooks and PayPal and tools that entrepreneurs can use. So you know, since you were an entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur in college all the way to now, how has the landscape really changed as far as, you know, really how you access capital?
So the startup ecosystem has improved in so many ways. I mean, there really, while we had an entrepreneurial culture as a country, there wasn't anything like the support network in place for startups today. When I was starting my first company in the early 90s, the mid 90s, capital formation is one of those areas where there's been a great evolution. We moved from a world where there were a few venture capital firms, almost all in California, to a more egalitarian way of accessing capital across funding platforms, large funds, small funds, angel networks, both regional and in verticals. And it's really a very exciting world. It's a lot easier to raise early, mid, and late stage capital than it was. Sometimes too easy, but it's very, very different than a world almost without any of those ways of capital formation.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what do you think has been kind of from then until now? What have you seen? Is it now the ability to crowdfund more successfully or use AngelList? I mean, what do you think now has been kind of one of the new tools that you have found to really help entrepreneurs today?
Well, certainly, obviously, crowdfunding is exciting, and obviously, we still have a bit of a logjam in allowing it to be done for straight equity. But every day, projects, including businesses, are funded on sites like Kickstarter and other sites. The equity piece, Congress acted on. It's still, a little bit slow in finally getting implemented through the crowdfunding for actual equity. But there's so many different ways to finance a company today. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, when really the only way was professional venture capital or bootstrapping. And there wasn't a lot of professional venture capital. There were a lot less firms than there were today. There was no such thing as a early stage firm. I mean, there's certainly no type of entity that was set up in a way where it would invest 50 or 150,000 in your business. You almost had to have, friends and family that were able to do it, and of course that's not very egalitarian and depended on more on your connections, and maybe you had, uncle who was a doctor or whatever, and I mean there was no way to access that if you didn't have access through your family.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the role of regulation for a second, in regards to enabling access to finance, financial services. What do you think the role of regulation should be? What do you see as kind of the right balance between enabling those services and also protecting consumers at the same time?
On the investment side, well, I think that Congress basically did a rare for Congress, but they did a pretty good job with the Jobs Act, where we just put some parameters around the type of crowdsourced equity investment people could make. People couldn't lose more than $10,000. We thought that was reasonable. I think that should really be the only protection. the whole point of it is to avoid registration and everything else. It's obviously buyer beware. There can be some kind of mandatory disclaimer that obviously you're not counting on this money, but it's not something that we should. When you're investing in a startup, you have to assume you're going to lose your money. So I mean, you can put that up front there, but I mean, 9 out of 10 of people will lose their money, but you know that going in. So I'm not sure what kind of. I mean, obviously there's anti-fraud laws. If somebody's taking your money and go buying a yacht or something, I mean, it's against the law. They can be arrested. But I mean, if they made a go of it and they failed, that happens most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that there's more do you think there's more legislation that can be implemented on the Hill right now, or that more action that can be taken?
Well, I was disappointed with the draft rules. I mean, I hope that we can just break through this logjam. Maybe it's an item that we can affect the funding of the implementation on or influence the administration. But it should just be implemented in a straightforward and simple manner as possible. I mean, anybody can go to Atlantic City or Vegas and lose $10,000 whenever they want. So why can't they just, throw it at a fun startup?
Right. That's exactly what we do.
It's a lot more fun,
it
right?
Is a lot
I mean,
more
come
fun.
on, those smoke-filled Atlantic City rooms. I mean,
seriously,
you're going to get lung cancer. And
right. Why take a chance at blackjack when you
Yeah.
can, roll the dice with some startups and actually make some money out of it? So let's talk about Bitcoin for a second. You've been a huge proponent of it. I mean, when we talk about, regulation and everything, me being a former political fundraiser, the fact that, the congressman was the first one to ever use Bitcoin on a campaign was incredibly exciting, and I'm sure for some people it drew a headache who actually had to comply on that front. But nonetheless, extremely exciting because you kind of see the direction of where campaigns are headed and how you can fund campaigns. But where do you see kind of the future of Bitcoin and digital currencies going as far as the regulatory environment or how we're using it?
Well, I accept campaign donations in Bitcoin. If you're so moved, it's polisforcongress.com. It's a Bitcoin link right there.
I wasn't trying to.
We had to wait for the FEC guidance on that. Federal Election Commission, which governs elections, so we'd wanted to take them earlier, but they actually had to issue a guidance that we were allowed to do it. I think that digital currencies are certainly going to be here to stay. The fact that there can be a peer-to-peer ledger outside of kind of involving a central government or central bank is a very compelling value proposition. Whether it's Bitcoin or something else doesn't matter as much as the fact that the concept, I think, is here to stay. It's really hard I'm not really a futurist, it's hard to figure out all the implications of it, but certainly reducing transaction costs, preventing nation states from gaming currencies for whatever end they might have, and fostering international trade. And so it's a lot of very positive and interesting implications. And so I'm very excited to see the era of digital currencies rapidly approaching.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you see it? Do you see any? I mean, we've talked about quite a bit here in the U.S., but have you seen internationally too a lot of discussion on how other countries are using Bitcoin or other digital currencies?
Well, I don't think the countries aren't the nation states aren't using them, but people are certainly using them. So, I mean, I think you have an interest whenever there's a global hotbed of problems. Whether it's going to be Venezuela or Russia, there's usually traditionally a flight of capital. Much of that comes into dollars, of course, but I think you'll see digital currencies as a route that people see to safety and to perhaps hedging the risk of their national currency or the sovereignty of their country. So it's again, it's the fact that we have a global peer-to-peer ledger like Bitcoin. Really, in the long run, these concepts will make, I think, the national monopoly on fiat currency obsolete. I think it has a lot of competitive advantages over the currency that's issued by nation states, and I don't know whether that's 10 years or 100 years, but I think it's an innovation that will win out.
So to shift for a second to global development, we have organizations like Kiva that are here, which really empowers entrepreneurs through micro lending in developing countries and here in the U.S. So what impact does access to capital play in developing really economic development in a lot of these third world countries?
Well, and Kiva is great, and what all these technologies do and servers do is they allow they take away a lot of the transaction costs around allowing capital to be deployed in a very small scale, and so there are plenty of creative projects that might only need $500 or $5,000. And until this new layer of interface and ability to fund them, there was no way, absent exorbitant transaction costs, to actually do that. So it's not that these many projects that are low cost have any lower returns than higher dollar projects. They may even have higher returns. But until now, there's been no way to fund them without prohibitive transaction costs. And so that's what is so promising about kind of many of these crowdfunding and lending platforms.
I think it's one of the things we've seen. So as I was briefly mentioning to people, I mean, we run this Challenge Cup competition where we go to 16 cities across 11 countries. I mentioned we were just in Nairobi, and we're on our way to India, and we've been to a number of, over the 2 years that we've done this, a number of developing countries. So on another aspect of it, how can we also kind of prop up, in addition to some of the micro lending and crowdfunding, how can we engage more with international startups that are in developing countries, whether it's access to capital, mentorship? What are some ways that we can kind of help some of that economic development?
Unfortunately, too many countries still have laws that are not friendly to capital formation and startups. And we can work on some of that through our trade agreements. There's some being negotiated now with some of our Pacific allies and Atlantic allies, removing barriers to capital formation in those countries. Obviously, they have to do it themselves. We don't set their policy. But I worked with one of my colleagues on a report on trade capacity building, and part of that is encouraging countries to remove barriers to entrepreneurship that still exist. So America can be the shining city on the hill and lead the way and show sort of best practices. Not that we always have an ideal situation every way here ourselves, but in too many places there are political barriers to the same kind of entrepreneurial culture we see here in our country. And of course, we need to continually seek to improve what we're doing here as well. But I think international mentorship, in the district I represent, there's a wonderful group called Unreasonable Institute, which mentors businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit, from the developing world, brings them to Boulder for training, and creates an ongoing network and funding structure to help support them as well. So a lot of examples like that are really changing the world.
So what I'd like to do now, in the interest of time, is kind of open it up to questions from the audience.
I'm right here. Hi, Katie Mitchell with Visa. Also, I was collegiate teammates with Jen George Nickel at University. I'm a new member of your staff. She said to say hello. So my question is really just
What does collegiate teammates mean? What team?
Rowing.
Rowing. Okay, cool.
My boat that I rowed in. Yeah. So my question is back to Bitcoin and digital currency. There's just so much action on the Hill now and with the administration on security. And so I'm interested in what your take is on both enabling innovation, but then also ensuring the security of consumers.
Well, consumers, there are many fraudulent activities, obviously involving dollars, and no doubt involving bitcoins. I mean, far more involve dollars. The notorious Nigerian scammers, probably prominent among them, but of course, incidents of security breaches at large vendors like Home Depot and Target. These are all in the dollar economy. The Bitcoin economy is much smaller and is not, a proportionate amount of a fraud, I'm sure, would occur there. So it's really de minimis now. Obviously, there's been some high-profile incidences, but there's a lot of dollar fraud. I mean, if you want to make money in fraud on the internet, you're going to do it with dollars because that's just where the money is. I mean, if you run a Nigerian scam based on bitcoins, you have like 0.1% of the market. If you run it based on dollars, I mean, you say send me bitcoins. Your 75-year-old grandmother won't fall for that scam because she doesn't want to send bitcoins. She might send dollars. So the scammers generally operate in dollars. Just makes business sense, just like legitimate vendors do. I think that there's nothing inherent in digital currencies around fraud that would attract Congress's attention or should attract Congress's attention. Fraud is a big problem on the internet, and so is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, there's discussion of what type of information sharing would be appropriate, what kind of assistance federal agencies might be able to provide, what is a better national strategy around cybersecurity. And that doesn't matter what the currency is necessarily. The other piece would be making sure that strong, fraud protection, consumer protection laws are in place.
Yulia Yani, I'm working on a real estate crowdfunding startup here at 1776. I think everyone in the industry, in the equity crowdfunding industry, is wondering when SEC is going to open equity crowdfunding to the general public, because right now it's to accredited investors only. And they've been promising it for the last 2 years, and are they doing anything, and how soon?
Well, I mean, really should have been over a year ago. I don't know why there's such a... and I'm worried that when they finally do, the rules will be so restrictive that it'll eliminate... The main advantage is obviously reduce transaction costs. If somebody can invest $10 or $15 without having to, go through hours of paperwork, then it doesn't really work. So hopefully... the concept is it should be as easy as as not getting equity and giving your money on Kickstarter or some other site. And I don't quite understand why we'd make it harder, because you actually get more. You get equity. If it's probably worthless, but you get something. So I don't understand why it's taking so long. It should have been done right away after we passed the law. I don't know when it'll be done, but I mean, presumably soon. I think, I don't know how long they can delay.
Good morning. My name's Carl Schonander with the Software and Information Industry Association. I noticed you did mention trade, which is high on the political agenda this year. 2 questions. First, can you provide a little bit more detail on your perspective on trade, TPA, TPP, TTIP, that whole alphabet soup, for or against, etc. And second, you mentioned that there were some provisions in there that could possibly help entrepreneurship in developing countries or in the trade partners. Could you explain what provisions you're thinking about? Thanks.
Sure. Well, I don't know much about when they're coming, if they're coming. People ask all the time. I haven't talked to anybody who knows or will tell me when this is the there's a trade treaty with our Pacific allies, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and one with our Atlantic allies in Europe, TTIP. So TPP and TTIP are what they're called, and they're basically substantial reduction and elimination of tariffs, and then they get into digital economy and leveling the playing field and those sorts of things. So the main advantage for American businesses of all sizes, but even more so startups, is access to new markets by removing barriers that usually large companies can figure out how to get around. I mean, it might mean setting up local subsidiaries. It might mean whatever the heck they had to do under the old rules. Startups were less able to do. So by allowing sort of access to these markets, and most notably Japan is a big consumer market, Australia, and then European markets, and then there's some developing nations that are in the mix as well, like Vietnam, and Indonesia. So those are effectively giving companies of any size, including startups, the same type of access to those markets that many larger companies would have enjoyed by employing lots of lawyers and figuring out how to do it. And I don't know the timeline or exactly what's going on with those. We hear, I mean, we just read the same things you do. That maybe there'll be something in the Senate soon.
Hi, Julia Farber with Underwriters Laboratories. I just wanted to know if you could share with us some of your insights and the things that you're most looking forward to now that Congress has just got it started up again, and really talk about anything, even outside the world of FinTech and entrepreneurship, that may actually have some legs in Congress. So anything that you think everybody can kind of get on board with and give us a little preview. Thanks.
Well, there's a lot going on. I'll start with some things of interest to the startup world. We're waiting for the final language on the president's executive order with regard to immigration and startup visas, if you will. They're not really necessarily formally visas, but it sort of mirrors what we've been trying to accomplish for some time with the way that entrepreneurs who are funded can come here legally to start their companies. So we have language being worked on for the executive order that allows for entrepreneurship visas effectively, which we're very excited about. We're also working on investor visas, EB-5 category, and reauthorizing that and streamlining that. It's a form of capital formation. When people agree to invest in an American company, they're able to come here and do that. Very important. I work a lot on education, so there's the prospect of replacing No Child Left Behind with a new federal education law. That will be a lot of my own efforts and something that I hope that we can accomplish. And all the other things we need to do to keep the country running. So there's always a lot on the plate. I work a lot on immigration and education, kind of two sides of the coin for human capital issues.
Right there in the back.
My name is Vanessa Berry, and I'm with the U.S. Department of State. Just speaking on the topic of education, can you also speak a little bit on the role of education overseas with regard to development and the intersection of entrepreneurship and FinTech? Am I pronouncing the abbreviated?
Well, so an education. Well, I mean, globally, in the information age, there's education is more important than ever before. Also, things like access to the internet, to computing terminals, a lot of the innovations around very low cost, network computing, very exciting. But there's a lot of areas that it's yet to reach, in the sense that kids in school and at home effectively don't have access to the internet. There's other places that have. So I mean, obviously, a prerequisite for any of the benefits of whether it's emerging financial technologies and capital formation or any of the other global opportunities require access. So there's still work on that basic front, on both the hardware side and the network side. But beyond that, we do see great examples of developing countries and areas of developing countries where people of all ages are doing great things and using technologies in ways that we wouldn't have even predicted, that are able to improve their quality of their lifestyle and help raise them out of poverty.
So I think we got time for one more. It's coming.
Hi, I'm Ed Gerwin. I'm a trade writer and consultant. I have a question. You had mentioned, Congressman, about doing a report on trade capacity building. Could you drill down a little more on that, about what some of the recommendations in that report were, and whether you see those kinds of recommendations getting into trade deals and other things that the United States is doing multilaterally?
We sure hope so. We're working closely, and I'll have to get your card afterwards because we'll send you a copy of it. I work with Republican Congressman Melanson, and together we have this trade capacity working group, and a lot of it is around removing tariffs. It's great, and trade agreements are great, but the capacity to engage in trade is also extremely important. That means allowing a way that businesses can form, facilitating, import and export, removing barriers to entrepreneurship, all of these things which to get the real benefits out of the fact that you have a system that allows trade to occur also need to occur internally. Now they're not going to be forced. I mean, you can't, but it's in every country's self-interest to do these things, and America has a good job. I mean, they're not really directed at us. I'm sure somebody could do a report about how we could do a better job too. But I mean, this is more focused on some of the developing nations that have very bad policies, if you will. Oftentimes, concentration of ownership, monopolies, a few families that own most of the means of production, incumbency advantages that they've co-opted law to prevent disruption of, all those kinds of things. And so we'll be happy to share the report, and if you just give me your card afterwards, that'd be great.
Congressman, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.